I'm coming more around to the idea that leaderboards in New World should simply be scrapped or at least removed in the time being. I simply think that they're going to add toxicity into the game and I don't think we need them in New World. Before we explain, if you want to support the channel and help me grow, becoming a YouTube member is the best way. Otherwise, consider giving me a follow over on Twitch. Now let's do a little bit of a backstory here with leaderboards. They were originally on the first roadmap scheduled for the end of 2022, and indeed they made it onto a PTR on the end of 2022 that actually was released in December without the leaderboards on them. Now we all thought they were taking the leaderboards off the PTR and bringing them back so they could make some improvements regarding some of the feedback that had been given. Then early in January 2023, the developers started talking about combat changes. That got everybody a little bit excited for the next PTR, only for them to drop the leaderboards. And they literally provided no real feedback to what had actually changed from December to January. And when you actually checked the end user experience, not much had really changed. I think some of the positions like on the leaderboards have gone from maybe like top 10 and top 50 to top 5 and top 25. Other than that, everything was pretty much the same. And I think that highlights one of the problems, right? They had a round of feedback that was given and it looks like none of the feedback was taken into consideration at all. The reality is, I believe there was probably a technical issue underlying it that was maybe causing server crashes or something like that. Basically, I'm guessing the leaderboards were causing a technical problem in the back end and they simply removed it from that PTR into a next PTR, and of course in that time frame none of the feedback could really be iterated on. It was like Christmas and stuff like that anyway. A lot of the fans of New World felt a little bit bait and switch by the idea that they were talking about combat changes only to then give us the leaderboards that we'd already seen before. Fair enough, I think that was just bad communication on AGS's part personally, but there we have it. Now we've seen that this PTR cycle is literally just going to be the leaderboards and they actually plan on implementing them either this week or next week. They say relatively soon, and then that will actually go live and it'll be the next PTR cycle where we get all the combat changes and stuff like that. Many big things are hinted at there and I'm very excited about those things. However, leaderboards have been a very interesting topic. Day one, it was anticipated that people would simply exploit their way onto the leaderboards. And on the PTR, people did that straight away. And then just recently, AGS was going to have a war event on the PTR. You're going to get titles and all kinds of good stuff for like participating. About 300 people turned up, me being one of them. I was trying to stream it over on here on YouTube. And let's face it, things went wrong. Now, I don't actually have a problem with things going wrong. It's sort of just a little bit funny. There's a little bit of a whelp meme going around, but I'm not really too bothered about that. Just to quickly explain what happened was, one, there was a delay in getting the war started. Two, when the war was getting filled, there was a mercenary limit, so only 25 people on one side and 10 people on the other could fight. So that obviously wasn't very good. So that war was ended early, and then the people who was in the war, they then got the war cooldown. Obviously that was unfair, and that's not what anybody wanted, and they couldn't fix it there and then. The merc limit was very clearly stated in chat a few times. People were like, hey, are we going to be able to get in because of the merc limit? And either they just thought it wouldn't be an issue, or the feedback was ignored. Either way, end result, they cancelled having the war on the PTR, and they just said go into OPR, Outpost Rush. And so we did. We had a fight, fair enough. Surprisingly, a lot of people spent the time just abusing the scoring system. And that's really what this video is about. It's what is actually getting rewarded on the leaderboards. So it really breaks down into three main categories of rewards, and I think the best leaderboard is actually the one when it comes to expeditions. So expeditions are going to be broken down into two sections. There are the people who run with getting the highest score, and there are the people who will run and get the quickest time. I'm not sure if both or one of them are rewarded. Either way, I'm okay with you rewarding that category. I don't think that will make every expedition a speed run. I think the only people are going to be speed running are people who are actually in pre-made 5-man groups, and that's fine. I don't think that will necessarily affect the group finder, for example. However, the next two things that they reward, I do think are a little bit problematic. One thing that they are going to reward is who can push the most amount of influence in a quarterly period. Now, this might be solved a little bit when it goes into timed windows, but really, all you are rewarding there is somebody mindlessly, endlessly grinding. Now, technically, even though I have a problem with that, I actually think that's less of a problem than the next one. I'm okay with rewarding people who have the most amount of time to play the game. Really, when you think about MMOs, what you want to do is reward the people who play a lot and the people who are more skilled. Now, probably the skilled people should have the best rewards, but the people who play a lot, they should also be rewarded, right? Give them something to say, hey, look, you did it, congrats. As long as it's not something that everybody really wants, like overpowered gear or anything like that, titles and cosmetics and stuff like that, I'm all for that actually. However, you are just rewarding time, you just need to be aware of that. And then the third type is really where the biggest problem is. And this is where you reward people with the highest score in in Outpost Rush and in Wars. What you are effectively going to reward are stat padders, and not just stat padders who play the game normally trying to get the highest score. You're actually going to reward people who exploit, and we've seen it on the PTR. If you go and look at the Outpost Rush scoring system, if you exclude the developer who was at the top, the scores that people are getting are insane and not realistic, and that's because what they have is people on each team. They're just going off into a corner of the map and hitting each other and healing each other, right? That's not what you want. Now you might say, hey, we're going to stop you from getting this high score, but I'd be very intrigued to what system AGS actually plans to implement to stop that. I'm not sure you can really detect it very easily. Are they going to want to put the manpower behind that so that they can validate each score? I just don't think so, right? And it's the same kind of issue in War. I think what you might see are wars that are intentionally going to get thrown and the whole sides are just going to stat pad, and it'll be who can stat pad the most. What you're effectively doing is not rewarding what you want the players to do. You want the players to try their hardest and do their best in those modes, and what you're potentially going to say is, well, actually, if you play in this suboptimal way, you'll get the highest score and you'll get the rewards. That for me is a problem. I think you should reward what you want players to do, and I'm okay if that means we change it from being who can get the highest score to who can simply do the most amount of outpost rushes, because otherwise we're going to reward toxic gameplay behavior, and I think that's problematic. Now there's a couple of things you could say here. What if you changed it to the most amount of wins in Outpost Rush? Well, you know what that would do? That would create a lot more 5-mans. That also possibly creates a negative experience for the majority of players. I don't really know the stats, AGS probably know the stats behind that. So what you could change it to is the most amount of Outpost Rush wins where the person has queued up as a solo player. Now I'm not saying that's a good idea, but that's just an alternative. You could also change it to who gets the most amount of Outpost Rush wins in a given period. Again, there you're just going to reward people's time, and you might inadvertently create a toxic environment where people, when they're losing, get really annoyed. Ideally, you wouldn't do any of those in my opinion, and I think until they're going to change the system more holistically, I think they should probably just remove the rewards. Introduce the leaderboards, but just take away the rewards. Take away the title, take away the skins, and just let people have fun with it, right? It would be nice to see who is the actual group who's running the most mutations. Who is the person who's getting the highest score in Outpost Rush? At least you'd be able to see maybe like the people who aren't abusing it versus the people who are. And we just have the stats for intrigue's sake. Putting rewards behind it means you're definitely going to get exploiters. Like, you're definitely going to get exploiters even if you have no rewards, but at least they're not doing it for any like personal gain. They're just doing it for the sake of it. What I would actually like them to change holistically is the way that things are tracked and scored. So Outpost Rush needs a new scoring system. There's a few people who's talked about this. I'm not like the first person to mention this, but it would be great to see maybe who can do the most amount of damage, who can do the most amount of heals whilst on the point or around the point in an Outpost Rush or a war. What you're doing then is you're rewarding people fighting on and around the points. That's how you want people to play in the main. So you could make it so that was what you tracked, and that's how you determined who got the rewards. Now the problem with that is you then don't reward the people who are doing the PvE farming in Outpost Rush. The people who are building the doors, building the bases, doing all that kind of good stuff. So I'm not sure there is a perfect solution, and that's why I think they should be scrapped. I think like scrapping the whole leaderboard is probably unlikely and unrealistic because they've obviously put a lot of work into it, and I do think having leaderboards are an interesting feature, but I do now believe they should take away the rewards. Not because I don't believe these people should be rewarded, simply because I don't believe the exploiters should be rewarded. Stat padding, I'm not saying is a massive exploit by the way, but like I don't believe the people who are trying to game the system are the people that you actually want to be rewarded. You want the players who are the best or the most time invested people to be rewarded, and that's not necessarily going to happen for all of these rewards. In my opinion, you could actually keep the PvE ones. You could keep the influence one because at least you know what you're rewarding, but the PvP ones, when it comes to War and Outpost Rush, I think they're jank and should just be scrapped until they have time to rework it. Am I confident in the next week or two that they actually want to release this update, that they're going to make any meaningful changes? No, I'm simply not confident they're going to do that, and if they're not going to do that, then the rewards should be scrapped. Honestly, at this point, I think that this feature is completely overblown for what it is. They've probably spent too much effort on it for really what I think most people aren't going to be concerned with. The reality is the people who are going to get the rewards anyway are literally the 1% or maybe like 5%, something like that. The rest of us are just going to be there for the intrigue. Now, I do think rewarding the 1 or 5% is actually decent and like it makes sense, right? It's not completely insane. I just think you need to be sure what you're rewarding first, and I'm just not sure that AGS are sure what they're rewarding. padding? Are they really surprised that people are going to go ahead and stat pad? And if they are, then they don't understand the player base. It's as simple as that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Did I say anything you really disagree with? I'd be very intrigued. Again, if you want to support me and help me grow the channel, becoming a YouTube member or a Patreon is actually the best way, or you can come and give me a follow over on Twitch. What I hope though is that you have a most beautiful day. Like and subscribe. Goodbye.